Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? My name is Jeff Van Dyck, and welcome to my talk, Unpacking the Complexity of a Simple Game. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully you're as caffeinated as I am. I'm practically vibrating up here. Okay, so a little bit about me. Here's a selection of games that I've worked on in the past. I'm a composer, sound designer, occasionally an audio director. I've been creating audio in games for about 30 years now. I got my start at Electronic Arts in Canada on their EA Sports and Need for Speed titles. Interestingly, I worked on the very first FIFA International Soccer, which I believe they actually just released the last version of that game, and we will no longer have FIFA from EA, which is interesting. Anyways, from there I worked at Creative Assembly on the Total War series and Alien Isolation. And more recently I've been working with mostly indie teams, and I really enjoy it. So, what are the main points of my talk? Okay. Unpacking had one programmer, Tim Dawson, who I think I see there. There he is. Hey, Tim. And he was very busy. You know, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And so the question was, how do we do cool audio stuffs but not bog him down with audio coding tasks? At the same time, it's important to have cool audio things. In retrospect, actually, there's some complex systems in this game, in the seemingly simple game. So what are they and how did we do them? Well, our solution was to choose Wwise for unpacking. I initially thought it might be a bit overpowered for the game, like picking up your shopping in a Cybertruck. But actually we used a lot of the features in the end. And it's particularly good at dealing with thousands of assets. By the way, are there any FMod employees here? My apologies. For what it's worth, I love FMod too. So, how we got started. After prototyping the game, Ren and Tim gave me the following information. Unpacking gameplay loop will be title, level intro, gameplay, options, album, and credits, more or less. There will be 8 levels, houses, based in various parts in Brisbane. Each house will have multiple rooms, bedrooms, kitchen, etc. There will be time of day and lighting visuals that will subtly change over time. They weren't sure how many items there was going to be, and actually I did a whole talk on the Foley in Unpacking at this year's GDC back in March. So if you want to hear a lot about Foley specifically, watch that talk. But conveniently, this is a huge amount of information early on. So I got started and I just started putting this information into Wwise in the following manner. I started creating states and switches based on the design. Wwise states affect anything that's referencing them. So they're good for synchronizing a bunch of events in Wwise. The music states matched the gameplay loop. So we can see the various gameplay stages. Level states was simply a list of the various levels in the game. Room states were unique for each level for variation. And in retrospect, I think I didn't need to do it this way. I could have just had a list of just the different room types. And as I used Wwise over this project, I learned more of its functionality. And in some cases, we were so far down one way of doing things, it was going to be more work to redo it in say, a cleaner fashion. Okay, so let's see how these states and switches relate to the sounds in the Wwise project. So here is the ambience, which probably should have been called room tone. It's a switch container with a list of rooms and their sounds. The list on the right there is the sounds, and the list on the list on the left is the sounds. The list on the right is the states, and you effectively just assign sounds to states by dragging them across. And yeah, so this is the case where there's a big list of repetition there, and I had intentions of having unique sounds, like the kitchen would sound different in each house. And then I realized it was probably just not worth the effort because it would be too subtle. And here I'm playing the sounds of these room tones. Very exciting room tone. It's subtle, and I mean, that's the name of this game, is subtlety. But you'll notice, like, room tone is basically the sound of the air in the room. And it's influenced by things like appliances or air conditioning or plumbing. So in a more interesting aspect of the sound in this case was the environment sounds, which are the sounds outside of the house. And interestingly, this is, it's a way of storytelling in a way, or helping the storytelling. So here I'm looking at the studio apartment, which is a blend container, and it has a bunch of other containers in it, and these initially all play all at once. And we use, it's full of city sounds, downtown, street, and the mix of these and how they come in are controlled by the time of day. And so here I open up the blend tracks, and you can see the time of day parameter there, and on these are all these different layers, and the graph going left to right is effectively a 24-hour clock. And so as the time of day progresses, different elements fade in and fade out. So as I've hit play here, we start to hear subtle little sounds. There's no traffic yet, but this is very quiet, but you will hear hopefully some bumps of effectively the sound of neighbors. There we go. So that's somebody walking overhead, and there's like subtle little voices, moving a chair. And these sounds just trigger sporadically and not very frequently, because we didn't really want to annoy the player. It is a chill game, after all. But we still wanted to add that character. So now as the time progresses, we start to hear some other sounds. We hear some traffic noises. And this starts to tell us a little bit of a story of this character, where she lives. So she's kind of in a noisy apartment downtown, and it might not be the nicest place, but maybe you're a uni student in your first place. And as time progresses, the traffic gets busier and busier. This gives context to the player without actually saying anything, which is kind of the motto for the game, really. So to break down the city sounds a bit more, we can see there's cable car, car drive-by, car horn, distant dog, and let's see here, what have I written about this? Yeah, these trigger randomly every 2 to 7 seconds using the transition function here. And yeah, so that keeps it sparse. And the child containers are quite simply collections of random variants. The downtown street sound or layer is an ambient sound that I wanted to loop but not sound repetitive. And so you can imagine I've taken a wave file that was, say, a minute long, and I've chopped it into pieces. And then I use this crossfade function here, and it just randomly chooses these pieces and overlaps them or crossfades between them. So you're hearing a 1-minute file, but the problem with hearing the same thing over and over is you start to recognize, a little bird tweet or a dog bark or something like that. So by cutting it up like this, it adds to the randomness of it, makes it less repetitive. And I guess it's a little bit like really coarse granular synthesis, if you understand what that is. But yeah, and you can see here in the game object profiler, it visualizes the little crossfades that are happening, which is really handy. Noises upstairs are doors being closed, chairs being moved, typical annoying neighbor sounds. I recorded my wife Angela upstairs in our house while I was downstairs with a microphone. Got a very accurate sound, and it was quite fun. Be more annoying. Yeah, and then I used the Wwise automation system, which you basically randomize in 3D where to position sounds each time it plays. So it plays in a different speaker, a different position, different volume. And yeah, and then for footsteps though, I wanted them to actually move. And Wwise has this really cool thing where you can draw a path for a sound, so I could make the footsteps go from left to right, forward to back, back to forward. So if you listen in your headphones or in a surround sound system, you can actually hear these people walking over you. And it's interesting and also a little bit disturbing. Okay, so Unpacking, while it looks isometric, is actually processed in 3D within Unity. And Tim gave me this really cool animation showing how it actually works. And you can see that the whole thing is actually organized in an exploded fashion so that he can sort what goes in front of what, and then he collapses it down into an isometric view. Sorry for simplifying that so much, Tim. But while there was this level of 3D in Unpacking, the rooms were kind of swapped in a sort of artificial way in that they were just sort of loaded in and they move in front of the camera, or the camera moves in front of them. The houses weren't set up in actual 3D, right? And so we wanted to give the illusion of audio being played in different rooms. And Tim came up with this idea, which we refer to as the audio wheel, or Tim's audio wheel. And I've made a very expensive animation to demonstrate this. There we go. That's fascinating. But as you can see, what we would do is if we wanted something to appear to move, we would treat them as if they were on this wheel and rotate the wheel around, and it would move the sounds around. So we didn't actually have to build like a 3D simulation of a house. And if that's not quite clear, this is how it actually worked. And I love transitions, I can't help it. And this is how it works in the game. And you can see, leave it to the player's imagination. And I think that's all I needed to be. Such a good, simple solution. Only the expensive transitions I use. So, I was having a deep and meaningful with myself the other day. Those ones where somebody comes up to you and you go and they say, dude, you're like staring off into space. Look, I saw a baby in a pram, and I was thinking about babies and how they like to shake things. And I realized every human in the world has done this. You get born, you're handed something and your first reaction is to shake it or put it in your mouth. But anyways, how does that relate to unpacking? In unpacking, you can shake things, and it's really satisfying. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to go into our gameplay sound effects, into the shake folder, and these are all the different things you can shake. We're going to look at the piggy bank. And the piggy bank has shake left, right, and stop. And we use a parameter called direction, which Tim sends me from his movement code, and this chooses which shake sound to play. And then on top of this, we have the intensity of the shake. And so we have soft, medium, and hard, and that is controlled by the velocity of the shaking. And as you can see here, as it chooses a different switch value based on the velocity of the mouse or controller. And so let's see how this sounds. And you can see there in the graph, that's the velocity value that I'm getting sent from Tim. And then I'm also getting sent, as I said, the direction parameter, which is a little bit janky because, look, it's a mouse. It's a bit hard to interpret that data that's coming from it. But more or less, it's, left, right, you get these. It feels like it's shaking correctly. Now, let's take this a step further. On the PS5, it has a couple of extra goodies. It has enhanced haptic feedback or vibration and a better sounding speaker in the controller. And both of these, we used Wwise to control it, and we had a bit of fun with it. I forgot to capture footage of this, so I desperately called my wife, Angela, yesterday to perform this for me. And this is what she sent. So that sound is actually coming from the controller itself, which is really nice because it feels really tactile. The other thing is when you turn on a music player, initially the sound comes from the music player on the TV, but if you pick up the music player while it's playing, we move the sound onto the controller. So, and it feels really neat to pick up the player and the sound goes into your hand. Thanks, Ange. And yeah, shaking on the PS5 is way more funner. Okay, so the PS5 actually opened up a big can of worms for us, but luckily Wwise has some features that helped us. So let's have a look at this. Initially, the Wwise has a device called System, and this is where all the main audio goes to, and Unpacking only used this device, but we had to add more devices to work with the PS5, and this is how Wwise has this feature to add extra devices per platform. And when we added those devices, it actually caused errors on all the other platforms, so we had to disable them on Windows and stuff like that, and they were giving us build errors and stuff like that. And then what we did is we have our item sounds here, and we sent them to both the controller speaker and the motion device. And interestingly, by doing this, Wwise translates the audio into physical motion information, and when you place an object on the table or something, that the vibration is generated by the audio waveform itself. In some cases, we wanted very specific motion as sort of a UI element, and Wwise has this ability to trigger a specific motion event. And so here I'm using the Wwise event system to trigger both a photo add sound, but also a photo add motion source. And when we look at what the motion source looks like, it's effectively an envelope, with low being not very much shake to high being a lot of shake. And so yeah, that's a sort of an intensity over time. And it was really quite interesting as an audio person to be given control over factoring in motion control, not motion control, but you know what I mean, haptic feedback in relation to audio. Low frequencies are very physical, you know, so we, you know, sub bass and stuff makes you shake around and vibrate, we feel that. But having control of that in relation to, like even more control over that in relation to the audio and the game was quite an interesting experience, actually. I quite enjoyed it. Okay, so let's talk about the music. Let's listen to a bit of the music in the game. Diegetic transitions were sudden, but I thought that was acceptable. All right, so let's have a look at how this works in Wwise. Here are the two music events that actually get triggered simultaneously. We have the music, which is the background music, and the music player, which is the diegetic music. The music is controlled by two different states. It's controlled by the music state and the level state. So you use both those states to choose the correct music for the, in this case, the gameplay. Which means then if you don't choose a level state, it will try to play gameplay just on its own, but without a level being defined, it won't play anything. If you go to play the intro, I actually trigger another music switch, which then uses the level state again to choose the right intro for the right level. So I keep reusing these states that we defined right at the beginning for more and more things in the game later. The radio state tells the background music to play the music player playlist, which is actually set to silence. I probably should have called that thing silence, but anyways, what this does is it mutes the background music and allows the diegetic music to play. Because both of these are playing at the same time, except one is muted. The music player uses 3 states to choose the correct song. Uses the music state, the level state, and then the music player switch, which is basically for levels that have more than one music player. So there's a level there that has 3 different music players in it, and each one plays a different song. So this setup is very complex, but what it gives me full control over the transitions from one state to another. And so for an example of the transition rule that we were just talking about, going from gameplay to the music player, it exits immediately, and it goes to the last played segment and the last played position. And same going back the other way. And what that does is that basically pauses the current music, plays the next song wherever it was at last time, and each time you switch, it just resumes where it was previously. Okay. So, Dark Star. I'll just show it and explain what's going on here. Dark Star is a fun mode you get to if you put everything into the wrong place. So I just sped things up on my thing here. It is kind of funny listening to music fast like this. We don't do that in the game. It's sped up because I sped it up in video editing. Now got our Dark Star. It's an achievement. But if you put stuff back in the right place, things go back to normal. If you turn on a music player, was having too much fun. Look, I wanted to kind of keep my talk fairly short and leave a bit more time for questions so I could be a bit more relevant to what you've come here for. So I'm going to call that the end of my talk now, and so thank you very much. And yeah, thank you. Hopefully some of you have some questions you'd like to come up and fire away.
Hi, really
Hello.
Cool stuff. How did you draw the line between a small detail that would be really cool to include and a small detail that doesn't need to be included?
Oh, that's a really good question. Intuition and experimentation. Yeah, look, like to go back a little bit to the Foley talk, my initial decision was to record the sound of everything on every surface, and I think we worked out that it was going to be like 75,000 sounds, and my wife talked sense into me, saying, "You're crazy," which she was right, And then, so there was a lot of that sort of stuff, like initial ideas, aim for the world, but then, okay, actually, let's just rein it in a little bit. Is there a particular detail in there that seems like overly detailed to you or under?
Oh no, it seemed like you got the perfect balance, and I was wondering.
Yeah, look, it was definitely a trial and error thing, and there are certain things, like I showed how I was going to have all these unique room tones for all the different kitchens, and it just turned out to be one of those things like probably not the best payoff for the amount of effort that it would have taken. It's so subtle, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was that kind of thing.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hey, Jeff.
How you doing?
I was trying to figure out how I actually want to phrase my question, but I guess I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about, I don't know, how best to collaborate with your programmer, especially when they're not specifically an audio programmer. Just like, how do you find that relationship, and how do you kind of push on things that you really want and also not waste their time?
It's one of my favorite relationships, and is so important to have right. And have the right person. One of the big pluses of working with Tim is that he's a huge proponent of tools, and he likes to make everything as easy as possible for his team. And by doing that, he enables all of us. And that's the sign of a good audio programmer or tools programmer in general. So. How I found that balance is I got lucky meeting Tim, and luckily he's that type of programmer. And I've come across a few programmers like this, and their goal is to basically make our lives easier because they like making tools, and they see things that we do that are repetitive or difficult to use, and they make it easier. So. In terms of how to find those people, yeah, it's just luck of the draw, I think. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Hello.
Hey there, I'm Olga, and I'm kind of asking a question also that my new friend Patrick asked me, but I'm not sure if I gave him the right answer. And I'm wondering if I'm a composer, so that's my background, and I'm wondering if sound design and composition are typically done by the same person, or are they two split roles? Because I guess in maybe larger, huge projects, they are very different skill sets. What do you usually do?
Well, look, here, the way it's worked with me is working on large AAA projects where there's huge budgets. You typically have sound designers, composers, you even go to the point of having audio-specific QA testers, or audio, like technical audio artists, and their sole purpose is to use Wwise. And to the point where the sound designers don't even touch Wwise. They just make the assets, and these technical guys put it in there. But in the land of indie, where you're on a smaller budget, if any budget, if you, as an audio person, can be multifaceted and can do sound design, you're going to help your team a lot more. You'll probably help your career a bit more, in the sense you'll give yourself more opportunities by being able to deliver both. So I highly recommend it to learn middleware, learn sound design. It's not easy, but I've found that because I can do both, it's given me a lot more opportunities in my career. And and then you just become that much more useful to your team,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, man.
Thanks, Jeff. Great talk. My question's about positioning. So obviously you've got the audio wheel for stuff outside the room.
Yes.
Because of the isometric versus 3D. Inside the room, do you have any positional stuff, or is it
There
all
is,
kind of straight in front?
No, it's actually very subtly 3D positioned.
Yep.
So it's not extreme, though. So you place something on the left side of the room, it is actually a little bit panning to the left or right. Yeah, it's very subtle.
Yep.
And that was a choice, just to not. I don't know. For whatever reason, it felt better that way. It was a feel thing.
Yeah. And was it complicated because of the setup with the isometric?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
Because basically all the items share the same sort of min and max dist, if you know what I mean. How far you can hear them away. But things like radios, in reality, you can hear a radio in another room through the wall or an open door. So they would have a different min-max or distance attenuation, so you could hear it from all these different positions on the wheel.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a mixture of attenuations, basically.
Yep, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, just a quick question about the organization of the Wwise project. I saw in the video it mentioned that the logo was in a separate bank.
Yes.
So it loads instantly.
Yes.
Is the rest of the game then in one bank with the entire...
Yeah, interestingly enough, it is. The whole game is in one giant bank. And I was kind of waiting for it to break. I kept on waiting for Tim to send me a message and say, dude, what are you doing, you know? But I think the audio bank in the end ended up being like maybe 300 or 400 megs, you know, with all the Foley in it and all the UI and everything. So it wasn't that big. And we hide the loading behind the logo screen. So while the logo screen is displayed and we hear the sound, which is loaded in an instant, because it's only one sound in that bank, the rest of the data is loading in the background.
Yeah.
And I think it even starts loading during the publisher logo as well. So yeah, so we use that as a trick to hide the loading, basically. Yeah.
So it's small enough that there's no need to split it up, so it's easier.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. In the end, yeah, we just loaded everything, and also, I mean, I'll be honest, we took advantage of the fact that like the rest of the graphics, like pixel art and all that stuff, isn't very big. It's pretty small amount of data, isn't it? And so I took full advantage of that and just used as much memory as possible.
Yeah, cool. Cool, thank you.
Maybe this is a simple one, but what's the difference between a piggy bank shaking left and shaking right?
That's a good question. They are probably, if you just listen to them, they sound the same. But yeah, we literally did do that. They're just a little bit different. There was actually a very subtle difference. And then the center one was the sound of, like when you stop moving the piggy bank, there was the sound of the coins settling, and that was the stop sound. But it was interesting. The first time we edited it, we did like, the sound had both shakes in it, like but when you trigger it, it would kind of double up on itself. So we found we had to actually separate left, right, and stop just to make it sound more articulate. You know what I mean?
One of those subtle things you can't really pick up on, but
yeah,
like
it is.
Subconsciously pick up on.
Yeah, it was all about the feel, you know. And to be honest, if I was doing, let's say I was going to make a percussion library and get a shaker sound in a percussion library, I would do the exact same thing to get that really accurate, articulated sound. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for reminding me that the GameSync monitor exists. I need to start using that again. You've told us what you did. Could you expand a little bit on how you got to that point with, I mean, obviously with a small development team, you know, what were the discussions that got you to the point of making this? I mean, as creatives, we quite often look at something and go, oh, great, I can do all this. And your client can have a completely separate idea. So could you expand a little bit on that discussion?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely initial direction. Oh, no, there's direction actually throughout the project from Ren and Tim, but I had a lot of freedom to kind of just do what I wanted and experiment with different things, you know, and that was what was so nice about working with Ren and Tim, is we all kind of just. Like I felt like we were quite synchronized throughout the project. There was a couple things where we weren't in sync, but you know, that's you know, collaboration in a group environment. But I think what made it so easy is that I think we all had the same kind of vision. You know, I understood Ren's vision of make this as chilled and, you know, everything eases in, fades in. You know what I mean? It's no hard edges. You know. Except for where it's needed or wanted, you know. So I would say there wasn't a lot of there was just so much synchronicity in our and common opinion that it just made it quite easy to do. Like I said at the beginning, after their prototyping, they had gone to Stugan and had like a really clear vision of what the game was going to look like in the future, and they gave me a lot of information. And then they got busy building it, and we got bogged down in actually building it. But with all of that information up front, it gave me all these states and switches that I could put into Wwise. And then there was times where I was just like looking in Wwise and going, oh, actually, I just realized that when that state's active, I can actually, like for example, when you go into a bathroom in the game, it reduces the volume and low-pass filter of the environmental sounds to give you the feeling that you're kind of deeper in your house and you can't hear outside as much. You know what I mean? And that was, that idea just came from looking at Wwise and seeing, oh, yeah, I can actually change mix settings based on a state, and I can set anything anywhere based on a state or a switch. So I made full use of that too. I hope I answered your question there. Anybody else? I think we might be done. Cool. Thank you.